into the mid-teens overnight, so certainly a much milder night for these areas compared to last night. A fresher night, though, to come for many areas of England and parts of Wales. And it will be a fairly bright start to the day. More in the way of sunshine to come for southern areas of England first thing tomorrow. Across the west, though, where we're closer to that weather front, we could see some rain, particularly across parts of Wales. But the heaviest rain through Thursday, particularly in the morning, is going to be across western areas of Scotland, moving into northwestern England. Some outbreaks of rain also across eastern areas of Scotland, but the far north and west of Scotland already getting into that clearer weather as that weather front does clear to the south and east, or move to the south and east through Thursday, pushing into Wales, bringing some more heavier rain for Wales through Thursday afternoon. As I said, many southern areas of England should stay dry through much of the day, central areas too, but there is going to be more of a breeze around tomorrow. Despite that breeze, temperatures still climbing towards the mid-20s, but a much fresher feel arriving into the northwest. Now that rain will push into the south and east through Thursday night, could linger across the far south through Friday morning, but once it clears away, a day of sunny spells and fairly light winds as well on Friday, so it will be feeling much warmer. And there's more of that to come for the weekend. Sunny skies for most of us, sunny spells at least, temperatures around the high teens and the low 20s. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could become the next giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt just a lot nicer. We went out for dinner, just enter. And you never expect to win, but I did.
Get your entry in now. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good evening. My name's Tom Harwood and I'm sitting in for the venerable Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg this evening. On State of the Nation tonight, Britain isn't working. A new report shows almost 10 million working-age Brits are out of work, which has been touted as one of the reasons for the nation's spiralling migration crisis. How do we get more Brits back into work? They're taking your money. First school tax, now touted higher inheritance tax. And shocking new statistics show the nation's council tax bill has not doubled but tripled since the start of the century. Is the government trying to tax us to oblivion? Breaking this evening, Britain confirms Ukraine can use UK weapons on Russian soil. This as Ukraine takes over 1,000 square kilometres of Russian territory. We ask, is this a brilliant and confounding move, shifting a static war and showing up the weakness of Putin's forces, or a recipe for far greater trouble? And in June, the G7 met in Italy. Today, 3 of those 7 world leaders have either been ousted or announced their departure from power. So who will be the next diplomatic domino to fall? State of the Nation starts now. Throughout, I'll also be joined by an eclectic panel, the Associate Comment Editor for The Telegraph, Mutaz Ahmed, and the trade unionist, Andy Twelves. Well, as ever, let me know your thoughts throughout the programme. gbnews.com/your say is the address to get typing on. But first, it's your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Tom, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories. Train drivers are to vote on a new offer aimed at ending their long-running pay dispute. That has been announced by the ASLEF union this evening. ASLEF said the offer was made in talks at the Department for Transport, which started after Labour won the general election, following months of stalemate under the Conservative Party. The offer is for 5% for 2019 to 2022, 4.75% for 2022 to this year, and a further 4.5% for this year and next. That is according to the union. The drivers are being recommended to accept that offer, which would end their 2-year-long dispute, during which they've taken 18 days of strike action, as well as refusing to work non-contractual overtime. The Australian Department of Foreign Affairs has confirmed an 11-year-old girl stabbed in Leicester Square is an Australian tourist. Australian consulate officials in London are offering support to the girl's family at this time. It has also been reported that the victim, who suffered 8 stab wounds to the face, neck and upper body, will likely require plastic surgery. In other news, violent attacks against women on British railways have more than doubled since 2021. New data shows the number of crimes against women and girls rose by 50% and the number of sexual offences jumped up by 10%. Unacceptable behaviour such as touching, upskirting or indecent exposures being experienced by women more than ever, with 51% of female victims stating that other rail passengers intervened to try to help. Well, earlier today, Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips said violence against women and girls is a national emergency. Ukraine's top commander says 100 Russian prisoners of war have been captured in the Kursk region. This after Ukraine launched a surprise offensive that President Zelensky has admitted was easy and met with little resistance. It comes as the Russian city of Belgorod has declared a state of emergency amid daily Ukrainian shelling that the governor says is destroying homes and killing civilians. Now, the latest figures show inflation rose for the first time this year to 2.2% in the 12 months to July. The increase was widely predicted and is largely due to prices of gas and electricity falling by less than they did a year before. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, said the new government is under no illusion as to the scale of the challenge that we have inherited. And a global health emergency has been declared for monkeypox, the second time in 2 years that the World Health Organization's raised the alert level. It's following an infection outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo that's now spread to neighbouring countries. The virus spread through close contact, and although it's usually mild, it can be fatal in rare cases. According to the New York Times, since the beginning of this year, the Democratic Republic of Congo alone has reported more than 14,000 Mpox cases and more than 500 deaths. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. This is State of the Nation at 8:05. Now, Britain isn't working. Fresh figures from the Office for National Statistics say that, they make it perfectly clear. 9.5 million Brits are neither in work nor looking for a job. Now, this level of economic inactivity amongst people of working age is a huge headache for the Prime Minister, and indeed it's certainly a factor contributing to this country's sharp increase in migration, with British bosses often having to look to foreign workers to fill their roles. All of this comes as students across the country receive their A-level results this week. University chiefs are encouraging youngsters to choose degree courses based on what they're passionate about, rather than pay potential or career prospects going forward. This again sparks a debate about the value of university and what exactly the state should be subsidising. Amidst this all, a soaring benefits bill. 750,000 under 18s are now claiming disability benefits, up almost 40% since 2019, when the number of claimants stood at just over 500,000. Now, the Department for Work and Pensions expects this number to hit 1 million. 1 million children claiming disability benefits for autism or ADHD and the like by the end of the decade. So how concerned should we be with the number of Brits both out of work and those claiming benefits? And what will it take to get Britain working again? Well, let's get the views of my panel, the Associate Comment Editor at The Telegraph, Mutez Ahmed, and the trade unionist, Andy Twelves. Mutez, I'm going to start with you. These numbers keep growing. Why?
Well, we see a tale of two Britons, basically. You see unemployment falling among the immigrant population, so lots of immigrants in jobs working, but you see unemployment rising, actually, among British-born workers. So on the one hand, you have the people who come to this country and get a job and, to use one example, deliver the Uber Eats. On the other, you have the British-born people who sit at home and perhaps who use their benefits to order the Uber Eats. That's a tale of two countries. One part of it's working, one part of it isn't. One part of it makes up for the other part, but politicians aren't being honest about that.
Now, Andy, do you agree with that prognosis?
I think to an extent, yes. It's from the statistics, the data doesn't lie. But I think really to fix this, we need to make sure that work pays. An apprenticeship wage at the moment is £6.40. That's absolutely ridiculous. You can kind of get it if they're a 16, 17-year-old living with mum and dad, all that kind of stuff. But apprentices, they go up to, into their late 50s, a range of ages. You cannot survive on £6.40. If we make work pay, if we bring the apprenticeship wage up and we really make apprenticeships worth it, like they were, pre the 1980s and 70s, that is where we really will see our Britons getting off the sofas, getting out of the benefits and, into the industry. There are 100,000 vacancies in the construction industry post-Brexit because a lot of the cheap Eastern European labour have gone home. So the opportunities are there. We just need the government to step in and make work pay.
This is the interesting point, is it not, Mutez, that we have a lot of job vacancies in the economy.
Exactly.
We've got a lot of people out of work in the economy.
Yeah.
And then we have the highest migration that we've seen in the economy as well. I mean, these three things really should not make sense, and yet they do.
Well, they frankly, they don't. In one sense, you're right. I mean, more people should be in apprenticeships. The problem is that a lot of people don't want to do apprenticeships. So a big part of our unemployment or out-of-work statistics is students. And I know from personal experience that there are a lot of young people who can't get into the job for whatever reason that they want, the exact job they want, so they take up a second master's degree to sort of waste time, essentially.
They need to get a grip, then. They need to get a grip. Everyone's dreams can't always be achieved. There's nothing wrong with being a bricklayer or a scaffolder. Go and work in a good, honest job. God forbid you can't go and be one of the top solicitors in the city. Boo-hoo. Go and get a job in the construction industry.
And you say people should get a grip. Of course, one of the reasons that these 10 million people are out of work of working age, but also why people below working age, under 18s, are claiming disability benefits more than ever now. People aren't getting a grip. Anxiety claims are up, ADHD claims are up, autism claims are up 40% since 2019. Now, some of that might be because we used to underdiagnose, some of it might be knock-on effects of the pandemic. But maybe some of it is that we don't have that stiff upper lip that we used to.
Yeah, I imagine some of it is, but obviously, 100 years ago we had less cancer diagnoses because we didn't know what cancer looked like in the way that we do today. I'd imagine some of it is medicine has evolved and we are more aware of these kind of things. But
in 4 years?
In 4 years, well, 4 years is a long time. 4 years ago, Boris Johnson reigned supreme with a big majority, and now, what's he doing?
What's the phrase? Sat like a giant toad upon British politics.
The fact is that millions of antidepressants are being handed out now, much more than used to be. It's pretty easy to go to a doctor and say you have anxiety and get an antidepressant and then to use that to claim benefits.
Sure.
Right, that's a big problem we have. The Tories were making a start in sort of getting a grip of that. They tried to come up with a plan to reduce the number of people on disability benefits, targeting those in particular with mental health issues, trying to help them get into work. Everyone knew that plan was wasted because everyone knew that Labour would come into the government and that Labour wouldn't be tough enough. We'll find out in the upcoming budget.
It's been 40 days, Parliament has been sitting, for what, less than 10 days? Not even that, probably.
Do you think
you need to give them a chance.
Do you think Rachel Rees will target the disability benefits budget?
I've got no idea. If Rachel Rees wants to be in her office, I'm sure she'd call me, but I'm here on GB News giving my commentary. If the Chancellor wants to ring me up, I will ask her.
If she's honest enough, she will. I don't think she will.
Well, let's wait and see on that point. Of course, the other element of this is employability, what people are doing at university. Our reporter Anna Riley was out in Hull today to ask the people of Hull what they thought about university and whether going is worth it.
Yes and no, because when they come out, it's the jobs for them, and they do all that work and all that money as well, what they're going to pay back, so I don't really know.
I think it depends what you want. If you want to get a career, then I suppose university is the only way in these days, because to get anything now, you need to have some sort of qualification. But as far as getting an education goes, you're better off reading books, better off having life experience. University and education generally these days, in my opinion, is more indoctrination than anything else.
If you're well prepared and you've got, a bit of money, some savings behind you, I think it is worth it. I think it can be stressful though.
Yes, of course it is, yeah. More opportunities in life, better job opportunities. I don't particularly agree with the financing of it. Maybe it should be less money or even free, but like Scotland.
Well, some mixed views there. But Andy, you're a trade unionist. What do you reckon about the value of university?
I'm sure that, as Lloyd said on the programme before this, I'm sure for some careers, you're looking at doctors, nurses, engineers, these kind of people who really need their kind of home talents.
Do nurses need university?
I think they should, with the state of medicine today, there should be some formal qualification that you take, whether it's more of a degree apprenticeship or a degree, I think there should be a formal requirement. But, if you're going and working as a barista in Peckham, you don't need a degree in English literature.
Mutaz.
I agree. Look, churning out degrees is an industry now, right? So you have hundreds of universities, probably about 100 of which shouldn't exist in a proper market environment. But if you're a student, you pick any topic you want, you get a student loan that you probably don't have to pay back. We'll fund it as taxpayers ultimately, and we just need honest politicians willing to say the tough thing, which is you probably shouldn't be in university. No one has the guts to say that at the moment, and so this industry is allowed to go on.
It is interesting. It's almost... Perhaps a big problem in our economy in 2007, 2008 was we thought no bank could fail. Too big to fail. It now seems that we live in a country where we say no university should fail. No matter how low respectability said university arrives at or the employability prospects of people graduating from it, everyone's worrying about some universities potentially failing. Is that such a bad thing?
I think no. a lot of the former polytechnics, a lot of the, Nottingham Trent universities, Leeds Beckett's universities, they should have said polytechnics. Realistically, I would have gone to a polytechnic if it had remained a polytechnic, gone and learnt a trade and then got a job. I think, we would do more by investing in these universities, keep them as institutions, but change them back into polytechnic colleges and give them proper trade schools. That's what we need.
Well, they've been bailed out, these former polytechnics, by something called immigration.
Yeah.
That's what you need to target. That's what you need to stop.
A lot of, non-polytechnics have as well. If you look at Imperial, UCL, KCL, particularly the London universities, they have a fair amount of...
these are high-quality degrees, though. I'm talking...
Yeah, but they come here and then they leave. So what's the benefit for the government subsidising them?
It does seem strange, does it not, that potentially some of our most respected academic institutions, the top 10, let's say, people come and then they go. Yeah. And then when it comes to those that are ranked lower down, people come... Well, they don't just come. They come and they bring their children, their spouse. One university place could account for half a dozen numbers on the immigration statistics. And those are the individuals that then perhaps don't get graduate-level jobs after graduating.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's an easy way to get around the migration system, and it's something that hopefully, the new Labour government will be able to solve.
That's interesting. You think that this government will be willing to crack down on that sort of route?
Well, I think he's said quite freely that legal migration is too high, illegal migration is too high, and he's exploring all opportunities. So, he said he's going to explore all opportunities, so I'm sure that will be one of them.
Do you agree?
No, that's not going to happen. This isn't a sensible government, it's a socialist government.
Is it?
It is, yes. It said lots
of... What socialist policies is it
This is a government that said lots of things during the campaign, such as,
But they weren't a government.
Taxes won't rise,
Have taxes risen?
They're due to rise. Rachel Reeves has said they will rise.
No, she hasn't. She said that the environment is not what they expected. She hasn't actually said that they will rise. That's spin from papers like The Telegraph, GBNews. She hasn't actually confirmed that they are going to rise. Unless you've got a leaked copy of the autumn statement.
Well, she's cancelled the taxes that the Conservatives were going to cut.
That's not a tax rise.
So that is a counterfactual. Had the previous government remained, the tax burden would have gone down. This government has come in and they said, we're not going to do any of those tax cuts, so taxes are higher than they would be.
Hypothetically, yes. If... it's a hypothetical. You can't go, oh, well, they were going to cut it, and now they haven't, so people are worse off. They're the same. It's the standard is the same. You can't base things on hypotheticals.
Are you really saying the government's singing from the same hymn sheet that it was during the election? It pitched itself as the party of pensioners and then came in and cut winter fuel allowance.
I don't think it ever branded itself as the party of pensioners.
It tried to.
Did it?
Yes, it did.
With what?
With the pensions quadruple lock.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I do. I do. So that makes them the party of pensioners, and then they've made a sensible financial decision, so they hate pensioners and they're not serious.
I'm just saying the tune is changing. It's changing already.
Well, on that point, gentlemen, hold those thoughts, because we are going to dive into the question of tax next. Are they really coming for your money? The nation's council tax bill, well, that's up 300% since the turn of the century, not to mention death duties and tax on education too. Are the socialists about to run out of other people's money?
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Controversy howls around a proposal to transform an area of Nuremberg's half-built Nazi Congress Hall into a new opera house. Proponents argue that repurposing the site for cultural use could help to reclaim the space, while opponents believe that it risks glorifying Adolf Hitler. The issue reflects broader tensions in Germany over how to handle the archaeology and architecture of Nazism. To discuss this, I'm joined now by The Telegraph's chief opera critic and the former director of the BBC Proms, Sir Nicholas Kenyon. Lovely to see you back on GB News. As I understand it, they want to put a smallish opera house, I think about 800 seats, within the horseshoe shape. So you would have to walk through, as it were, this historical Nazi territory to get into the opera house. What do you think?
Well, the first thing to say, Michael, is that Nuremberg is such an important centre of German history. And so this site is going to be especially contested. You know, we've had the Nuremberg rallies after the war, we had the Nuremberg trials. Its history goes back centuries. I went there, but I went there to visit the birthplace of Albrecht Dürer. And of course, as you would know, Wagner's Master Singers of Nuremberg is set there. So I think you've got so many things jostling. I feel absolutely certain in myself that buildings need to move on. They need to be repurposed, they need to be reinvented, but it's not for me to say what weight of tradition would fall on those people going in to a new building in the knowledge of what it used to be.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, this is State of the Nation at 21 minutes past 8. Now, are the socialists about to run out of other people's money? Inheritance tax is now all but certain to rise. Almost uniquely in the world, VAT is about to be imposed upon education. And new research shows that the nation's council tax bill has more than tripled since the turn of the century. Are we going to be taxed into oblivion? And is the government taking too much of your hard-earned cash? Well, to discuss this, I'm delighted to be joined by the researcher at the Taxpayers Alliance, Callum Goldrick, and my panel still joins me too, the associate comment editor at The Telegraph, Mutaz Ahmed, and the trade unionist, Andy Twelves. Well, Callum, let's start with you. This is your research. What does it say?
So, yeah, we found that since the year 2000, council tax has gone up by 214%. In nominal terms. It means that in the year 2000, the councils received 12 billion in council tax. This year it was 38 billion.
38 billion, that's not adjusting for inflation, or is it?
Oh, no, it's not. But even still, is that inflation hasn't gone up 214% in that time, so they're still charging an awful lot more.
An awful lot more of cash coming out of people. That is, of course, more in nominal terms, it's more in real terms. What are we getting for it?
Well, that's the thing. We were in Solihull a few weeks ago asking people what they think about their local council, and the consensus was they're not happy. You know, unfilled potholes, missed bin collections, that was the same when we went to Guildford, it was the same when we went to Pembrokeshire. It's the same all over the country. People are just unhappy with their councils.
Does Solihull sit within the... It's just next to Birmingham.
Just next to Birmingham.
Yeah, Birmingham's a particularly interesting case here as well. They're one of the many councils that have actually managed to go bankrupt.
Yes, they did go bankrupt. They also had a number of EDI officers on their books. So another bit of TPA research, we found they had 717 EDI officers costing 52 million.
Equality, diversity and inclusion
every
officers.
council in the UK, yeah.
Wow. Well, let's broaden this discussion now. Mutaz and Andy. Andy, clearly council tax has risen over the last 24 years. That's how many years they've been in this century. Why hasn't it felt like services have got better?
I think because there's a complete disconnect between central government, county councils, and then district or borough councils. Nobody really talks to each other. Most have kind of different parties running them, and it's just a bit of a mess, really. There's a serious disconnect in local and national government communications, and it's really not OK. It's a mess.
It's a mess.
I don't buy these sort of systemic arguments, because some councils have done a good job. They've They've saved money, they've kept council tax low. Sometimes they're neighbouring councils to councils that have done a really bad job. I can think of some examples here in London. At the same time, these councils have been able to raise huge sums of cash from parking fines, from LTNs and so on. I think the problem is that some council leaders focus on their hobbies, focus on pet projects, while just completely disowning the basic stuff, which is bin collections and potholes. It's the council leaders who are the problem.
Council leaders. And yet, some of these council leaders, more research from the Taxpayers Alliance has found, are on enormous salaries. Every year you produce a council fat cat list.
Yeah, so the Town Hall Rich List is our landmark bit of research every year. This year it was over 3,000 council employees earning over £100,000.
3,000, that is a pretty large number. And of course that's earning more than members of Parliament.
Yes, much more. It's earning more than the Prime Minister is. You know, many of them, I think there was over 500 earning more than the Prime Minister. And, you know, when you say, do they have the responsibility of the Prime Minister, I think everyone would agree certainly not.
Now, it could be said that the Prime Minister doesn't earn enough.
It could be, but, you know, that's a separate argument to why can he do his job on that money, but the councillors can't seem to fill potholes and collect bins on time in their boroughs.
Now, of course, a lot of this, Andy, as you mentioned, is that we fund local government in a very weird sort of way. Other countries allow local government to collect much more of the money when there's economic development in places, but of course our councils don't really have the same incentives.
No, I think that's something that should be changed. You know, I think the Labour Party didn't address it the last time they were in government. The Tories haven't really addressed it, and I hope that they'll kind of offer some incentive for genuine growth in both city and county councils. You know, and particularly the new combined authorities. Last year we saw the creation of I think 3 or 4 more combined authorities. So you've got larger local government, and hopefully, you know, they'll actually do something with that.
Larger local government could mean more expensive local government.
Yeah, but hopefully there'll be more connection and more people. But less people talking to each other and just people doing stuff.
Now, of course, all of this is in the context of an autumn statement that we're expecting in October from the new Chancellor. Mutaz, what do you reckon is going to be in it?
Tax rises.
You say with a sigh.
You can hear all the excuses already. You know, we've inherited the worst economic outlook, even though it's a pretty good economic outlook compared to other European countries. You know, it's the Tories' fault, and we're just going to do what Labour does, which is raise taxes.
Callum, there has been some media speculation about what's going to be in this autumn statement, not least inheritance tax, this famous 7-year rule potentially being abolished, dragging many, many, many more families into paying much more inheritance tax.
Yeah, well, we know inheritance tax is inherently unfair just because it means it's basically a tax on death. It's so easy to get around for people with large estates and good accountants. You know, you can gift a certain amount each year to your children and then you don't have to pay it at all. It's quite an unfair tax in many ways because if you're just over the threshold but poorer, you're likely to have to pay it just because you can't get out of it in time. It really doesn't make much sense.
And I suppose a lot of people who've experienced the asset boom of the last 15 years bought their house for twopence halfpenny, and now the family home is suddenly worth well over that threshold. Andy, I suppose it fits in more with Labour ideology that inheritance tax is perhaps a great leveller.
If it was higher, I think if the threshold was higher, then yeah, you could make that argument. But I think it's too low for you know, any sensible Labour Party member to go, yeah, that's fair enough.
And yet it looks like this is one of the taxes because, frankly, because Rachel Reeves has boxed herself into a corner here, she's given junior doctors 22.5% pay rises, public sector workers across the board 5.5% pay rises. Now she's saying that there's billions of pounds that she needs to fill, but in the election she promised not to raise income tax or VAT or national insurance. Yeah. So it's almost every other tax that's going to have to be raised.
I mean, you know, we'll see what the Chancellor has to say. I wouldn't support, you know, the inheritance tax being reformed in that way, but, you know, we'll see what she has to say. I wouldn't support, you know, going against what was promised in the election campaign, but, you know, I don't work in number 10.
But this is the clever thing, and I had Labour Minister and Labour Shadow Minister after Labour Shadow Minister on this programme talking into this camera here, and I asked them, can you say that you categorically won't raise capital gains tax, for example? And they'd always give a roundabout answer. The phrase they used was, nothing in our manifesto requires raising capital gains tax. Well, guess what? In their manifesto wasn't a 22.5% pay rise for junior doctors. In their manifesto wasn't a 5.5% pay rise for public sector workers across the board. It looks pretty certain that these weasel words will now be applied to every tax that they didn't specifically promise to freeze.
Well, we know governments and would-be governments make a lot of promises in the run-up to elections. Obviously, they can't run around saying we're going to raise every single tax. But what we have seen is that they have put taxes, VAT on private schools, which seems to be having a bad effect. I assume they'll be raising other taxes as well to pay for a number of social programmes that they're pursuing.
Just on inheritance tax, I actually blame the Tories for this, because there was an opportunity to scrap it, and that would have made it much harder for Rachel Rees to reintroduce it. They didn't take that up. The other point to make is that the very rich do not pay inheritance tax. They have exemptions, they have tax planners. It's the middle class who get hit by this.
It's an important point, but of course the Tories did two very expensive, I hate calling tax cuts expensive, two tax cuts that meant they had obligations to pay for spending that were harder to meet, although that's a mouthful. That basically no one noticed, these national insurance tax cuts.
Exactly.
If they'd have done a big, in-your-face inheritance tax move, even though it wouldn't be as productive, because it wouldn't be taking tax off work, for example, it would have hit the headlines a lot harder.
Yes, we campaigned for it for a long time.
Yeah, the Telegraph.
We did, at the Telegraph, and they didn't listen, so...
Well, there you go. If you're wanting a reason why Rishi Sunak lost the election, the Telegraph might well be there. Well, Callum, Andy and Mutaz, thank you so much for joining us and talking through what has been a taxing conversation. Not at all taxing, it's been fun. Now, Ukraine continues to advance into two border regions of Russia, taking over 1,000 kilometres of Russian territory. Is this a tactical masterstroke or a strategic mistake? We'll be delving into the fog of war right after the break.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Tomorrow is looking pretty wet across northern areas. Across the south, though, it should stay mostly dry, but it's going to be a breezier day than today. That's because low pressure is moving in from the north and west overnight tonight, bringing with it a weather front that's going to stick around for a few days, particularly across the northwest, moving into the southeast later. So through this evening, that cloud will eventually clear the far south and east, leaving a dry and fine night for many areas of England and Wales. But that wet weather will spread across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and the temperatures here will pick up into the mid-teens overnight, so certainly a much milder night for these areas compared to last night. A fresher night, though, to come for many areas of England and parts of Wales. And it will be a fairly bright start to the day. More in the way of sunshine to come for southern areas of England first thing tomorrow. Across the west, though, where we're closer to that weather front, we could see some rain, particularly across parts of Wales. But the heaviest rain through Thursday, particularly in the morning, is going to be across western areas of Scotland, moving into northwestern England. Some outbreaks of rain also across eastern areas of Scotland, but the far north and west of Scotland already getting into that clearer weather as that weather front does clear to the south and east, or move to the south and east through Thursday, pushing into Wales, bringing some more heavier rain for Wales through Thursday afternoon. As I said, many southern areas of England should stay dry through much of the day, central areas too, but there is going to be more of a breeze around tomorrow. Despite that breeze, temperatures still climbing towards the mid-20s, but a much fresher feel arriving into the northwest. Now that rain will push into the south and east through Thursday night, could linger across the far south through Friday morning, but once it clears away, a day of sunny spells and fairly light winds as well on Friday, so we'll be feeling much warmer. And there's more of that to come for the weekend. Sunny skies for most of us, sunny spells at least, temperatures around the high teens and the low 20s. Bye-bye. Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK. From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, this is State of the Nation at 34 minutes past 8. Now, Ukraine forces have pushed further into Russia, with the Kremlin hastily building trench lines and fortifications within its own country, all to prevent Kiev's troops from advancing further. Well, Alexander Syrskyi, the Russian-born Ukraine army chief, says that his soldiers have taken over 100 Russian prisoners since they began an assault on the border regions of Kursk and Belgorod. Russian officials say roughly 200,000 people, 200,000 Russians, evacuated. Well, the MOD confirmed today that Ukraine has permission to use British weapons inside Russia. But what is Kiev actually trying to do here? Is it attempting to draw Russian resources away from other areas on the front line? Is it trying to gain leverage for potential peace talks? Or is it aiming simply to humiliate Putin, damage his image of being a man that brings security to Russia? Joining me now is Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Chris, it's an audacious move to march on Russia. I suppose at least the Ukrainians did it in the summer, not the winter.
Yeah, it's a good point. There are lessons there, aren't there? The fact of life is, one thing the Ukrainians have been very good at in this war is surprising not just the Russians, but also the rest of the world, not only with their adaptation of technology and some of the innovative ways in which they've used drones, but here's another example of where they've said, look, what are we trying to achieve here? And you mentioned some of the things, humiliate Putin, discredit him with the people, because one of the interesting things is that the vast majority of the Russian population don't know anything about this going on in Kursk and Belgorod, because the propaganda system is keeping them well away from it. Indeed, some of the locals said, we don't understand why we're being invaded. We're a friendly, peaceful country. So you can see the grip that the regime has on people. But it's a masterstroke, really. They're sitting on Russian land, as you said, Tom, 1,000 square kilometers. They haven't been thrown off yet. They haven't been attacked in any serious numbers. And frankly, the Russian national and local governments have collapsed in relation to this incursion. I've heard that Russians themselves are looting shops and homes in the region. And as you say, 200,000 people are either evacuated or being prepared to evacuate.
It is extraordinary, and I don't know if I'm being too fickle, but I've presented many programmes across GB News over the last year, and whenever there's been a slight Ukraine story, we've ummed and ahed about doing it. I mean, the front line has basically been frozen for months and months and months. This seems like a masterstroke, so unexpected, so no Western strategist really saw this coming, but also suddenly now the eyes of the West are once again on Ukraine.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Tom. They've managed to focus everything back on what Ukraine is doing rather than what Russia is doing, or indeed what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. And part of it, is trying to say to free world governments, you wouldn't let us use those weapons. Look, we're just going to go and do it anyway. And one thing that people haven't noticed is the fact that this assault has coincided with some long-range drone attacks on Russian airfields up to 400 kilometers away. Well, when you consider that Moscow is only 600 kilometers away, then you can see how damaging that is for the regime and for the military. But frankly, when you've got a border the size of Russia's, it's very difficult to hold all of it down at once, and the Ukrainians have exploited that.
It is fascinating. Clearly, troops are being moved from the intense fighting in the south of Ukraine, the Russian troops, I mean, going up and around now to the north of Ukraine. But more than that, is there a risk here for Ukraine? Is there a risk here, frankly, for the West? We know that British weapons are being used on this incursion in Russian soil. It is the first time since the Second World War any sovereign country has dared invade Russia. Is there a risk of escalation here, particularly not just for the people of Ukraine, but also for the people of the United Kingdom?
Tom, one of the things that Ukraine has complained about is that we've been scared stiff of escalation. And each time Putin has been able to say, well, the West isn't going to do what Ukraine wants because they're afraid of my huffing and puffing. Well, he's had his bluff called here. He said in the past, for example, that if anybody invaded Russia, then he'd use nuclear weapons. But of course, he's caught in a bind because he doesn't recognize that Ukraine is a separate country. So he can't really explain that why he would use the maximum force or indeed nuclear weapons on Russia itself. So the propaganda, I'm afraid, is contradicting itself really badly. Right now, I would say that he's feeling weak. He looks as if he's lost face. His military, is going to be wondering what on earth they have to do to recover this situation. I suspect the Ukrainians will withdraw before the Russians can bring up the big guns.
It was fascinating earlier this week to see a live broadcast with the political chief of the Oblast alongside Vladimir Putin. They were both on a teleconferencing call, broadcast to many people, and the political head of the Oblast in Russia that had been invaded was saying, "Oh, we've had 1,000 kilometres," and Putin shut him up. He said, "You don't know that. You don't know that. We have the facts." He wasn't letting his own subordinates explain to the people just how much Russian territory had been taken.
Tom, I think we underestimate the extent to which the Russian population is controlled in terms of its perceptions. We complain a lot in this country about information warfare and all that sort of disinformation, but it's absolute strategic industry in Russia. And 78% of the population support what Putin is doing, both domestically and in relation to foreign policy. Now, it's going to take a long time to turn that around, and the Russians spend a lot of effort and manpower in maintaining these illusions. And what Ukraine has done is punctured that balloon, and the air is rapidly seeping out of it. And if Putin doesn't actually do something about it, the rest of the population are going to start asking questions.
Now, of course, Kursk is a very symbolic place.
Very much.
And anyone who knows their Second World War history will know this is the Battle of Kursk was when the tide of the war really, really, really did turn in the east, perhaps second only to Stalingrad. If the Ukrainians manage to take Kursk, that's a huge symbol.
Yes, it is. But I think that they're not so stupid as to get bogged down in urban warfare. They don't need to take Kursk. They've actually achieved what they want to achieve. They've driven far into Russia. The world knows that. And I suspect, as I said, before it gets too sticky there, they'll withdraw and say, look, we can do this anytime we like at a time and place of our choosing.
That is very interesting because I suppose finally here, we are looking at perhaps a negotiated end to this war. In some ways, figures in Ukraine have entertained the possibility of negotiations. Putin has always been saying, well, let's just freeze the lines where they are, of course, with Ukraine losing a significant chunk of its territory. Well, now freezing the lines as they are means that Russia loses territory too. I suppose in that way it could also be a bargaining chip.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I think Russia, if it chooses, can apply as much battle-winning capability as it likes to take back that. What Ukraine's got to avoid is having that force isolated, surrounded, and either captured or destroyed. That would be very bad indeed for Ukraine. So, as I said, I suspect they'll withdraw. They won't hold on to that territory. Okay. I, like you, I think towards the end of the year, after the campaigning season, we're going to see pressure coming on both sides to actually come to some sort of agreement. But you and I both know that even if the Russians agree to something, that they'll just regroup, they'll rearm and come back again next year. So somehow Ukraine has got to have some sort of security guarantees that its current territorial integrity will be maintained, and somehow they'll get back some of the territory. My own belief is I don't think the two eastern provinces will ever again be part of Ukraine. They're the most Russian-speaking and most culturally aligned with Russia. And right now, the Russians are purging people and killing people in those provinces. And I suspect they're really absorbing them into the Russian system. As for the other two and Crimea, I think that they're all up for grabs in terms of negotiation. But as I said, Ukraine's got to have security guarantees. That can't be membership of NATO yet, I don't think. But something approaching having the borders guaranteed by NATO might fit the bill.
Well, it's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, really appreciate your expertise, and I think we can all perhaps sleep a little bit more soundly in our beds that it doesn't look like Mr Putin will retaliate against British weapons, specifically being used in Russia. Thanks for joining us. Now, as 3 of the 7 world leaders that met at the G7 summit just in June have already announced their departure from office, we're asking, who's next? We're going to look at some interesting approval ratings for some of the world's best-known leaders next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles has launched his own aftershave, costing, wait for it, an eye-watering 135 quid for a 100 millilitre bottle, promising buyers that they can smell just like the gardens of his Highgrove country pile. Now, this is something that Meghan Markle would do, surely not the King. Is this a case of King Charles selling out, watering down the brand just like Meghan? Well, join me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show.
Martin,
often on this
hi.
show, we've had a pop at Meghan Markle, the Sussexers, for selling out, for flogging strawberry jam, and now the King is flogging Pong. Is this really the right royal thing to do?
Do you know what? So the joy of a luxury Highgrove splash, you know, at the end of the day, Highgrove is such a special place, and the Highgrove shop sells amazing things on there. And as we know, the profit actually goes towards charity. So it's the King's Foundation, which was formed in 1986. Profits go towards educational and training, and it's all to do with this sort of sustainable world. But not to forget as well the charitable aspect and the whole ethos of the King's Foundation, and that's so important. This is not just something that's going up on the website and just being sold purely to go into someone's pocket. So I think, you know, all in all, I think everyone should have a look at the Highgrove website and see what's on for sale. I mean, there are lots of really lovely, I think pretty fairly priced products, and even more so, go and see the gardens. You know, as we know, King Charles is a keen environmentalist, and the gardens are fabulous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is State of the Nation at 47 minutes past 8. Now, throughout the programme, plenty of you have been getting in touch. Mari says, no wonder people don't want to work with all this taxation, funding of overinflation, pay increases and government-funded jobs. This country is a disgrace and has lost its way. Another viewer says, Labour are looking after the unions at everyone else's expense. It's a standard Labour move. Richard says, I think a lot of people won't mind paying more tax if public services were great, but they're not. Until we stop paying more and more into the bottomless pit that is the NHS, nothing will improve. Goodness me. Well, keep sending us your views. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. But finally, today, back in June, during the annual G7 summit in Italy, The Telegraph published an article titled, "Welcome to the most unpopular G7 summit ever." The article showed the staggeringly low approval ratings of the world's most powerful leaders of democratic countries. Just 8 weeks later, three out of the 7 have left office, either being ousted or announcing their departure. First came Rishi Sunak, losing his election. President Joe Biden announced his retirement next. And just this morning, or overnight, Japan's Fumio Kishida has announced his stepping down too. With nearly half of the world's most influential political figures from advanced democracies falling from grace in less than 2 months, well, less than 2 months representing their nations on that world stage, it begs the question, who's next? Given recent polling figures, they give Canada's Justin Trudeau a disapproval rating of 59%. They see his Liberal Party trailing the Conservatives in Canada by 20%. Could it be that once Golden Boy Trudeau, could he be the next diplomatic domino to fall? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham, Dr. David Dunn. Thanks for joining me, David. Looking at that list, deeply unpopular leaders, why do you think that is?
Well, what we have is incumbency itself is unpopular because we are living in very difficult times. Geopolitically, the world seems in turmoil, and there doesn't seem to be a way of bringing conclusions to the war in Ukraine and in the Middle East. And more importantly, the world is suffering the consequences of the coming to a complete halt of the world economy that took place during the COVID crisis and the resulting economic inactivity of that period, huge borrowing that went on then, and as a consequence, a cost of living crisis and massive price rises, inflation across the board. And people associate all those high prices and real hardship with the people in power. Rightly or wrongly, there is an anti-incumbent mood. Throw the people out and let's hope for something better. And of course, politicians are using this all the time. So Donald Trump is saying, were you better off when I was in power? If so, vote for me, irrespective of the fact of what's happening to the global economy or indeed the geopolitical situation. So there's the cost of living crisis, there's inflation. More broadly than that, you could add to that list a loss of trust in institutions, really dating back to the Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan, when people feel that they were misled and betrayed by what was behind those wars.
But David, let's stick on that first one for now, this economic effect. Sure, okay. Are you telling me that the United Kingdom is not the only country in the world that's experienced high inflation, that's experienced a spike in interest rates? I mean, listening to the last general election campaign, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Liz Truss was to blame for all of the economic woes we're experiencing.
Well, certainly the financial crisis that took place under Liz Truss was a thing that added considerably to the general trend. But the general trend is across all major economies, all with the possible exception of one or two isolated places. But actually, inflation is a global phenomenon. The cost of living crisis is a global phenomenon, and that's due to, as I say, the fact that actually the American oil markets had to pay to take the oil away. They actually had, the price of oil went negative. The global economy was stagnated. It ticked over, and massive debts were incurred by that.
It's
and of
hugely unstable times. I'm looking at this round table here. Of course, 40%, over 40% of that round table have now announced their departure from office. Quite extraordinary. But looking at the disapproval of Macron, who we can see there, of Olaf Scholz in Germany, of Justin Trudeau in Canada, if you were a betting man, who's out next?
Well, Trudeau, just by virtue of the fact of who's up for election next, it's Trudeau's turn, and then it'll be Germany, and then it'll be France, actually, because that's the order. And all of those look like to be changed. I mean, one of the reasons why Kamala Harris is popular in the polls now is that she's trying to disassociate herself with the Biden administration, even though she was a part of it. And she's putting herself forward as the change candidate. It's change that people want. You can add to that the internet, actually, people getting the different sources of news means that they're less trusting of traditional media messages, and that adds to that lack of trust. And actually, I'd go one more important point further. It's not just a lack of trust in the incumbents in office, the office holders. It's actually a lack of trust in democracy and politics itself.
It's big questions there. Thank you so much for joining us. Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham, Dr. David Dunn. Really appreciate your time. Goodness me, perhaps we're not all so unique after all. Well, that's all from me tonight. Coming up next, of course, is Patrick Christys. And Patrick, what's on the bill of fare for you this evening?
Well, happy Pakistan Independence Day to you, Tom. We've closed roads and hoisted the Pakistani flag above several public buildings. But meanwhile, England fans were banned from celebrating the Euros. Violent migrants are now attacking locals in Dunkirk. When will the Refugees Welcome Brigade realise that we've got a problem on our hands? And Prince Harry won't come to England because it's not safe, but he will go to Colombia.
Goodness me. Well, Patrick, look forward to it. That's all from me this evening. Of course, up next, it's the weather, and it's sunny in Somerset.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Tomorrow is looking pretty wet across northern areas. Across the south, though, it should stay mostly dry, but it's going to be a breezier day than today. That's because low pressure is moving in from the north and west overnight tonight, bringing with it a weather front that's going to stick around for a few days, particularly across the northwest, moving into the southeast later. So through this evening, that cloud will eventually clear the far south and east, leaving a dry and fine night for many areas of England and Wales, but that wet weather will spread across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and the temperatures here will pick up into the mid-teens overnight, so certainly a much milder night for these areas compared to last night. A fresher night, though, to come for many areas of England and parts of Wales. And it will be a fairly bright start to the day, more in the way of sunshine to come for southern areas of England first thing tomorrow. Across the west, though, where we're closer to that weather front, we could see some rain, particularly across parts of Wales. But the heaviest rain through Thursday, particularly in the morning, is going to be across western areas of Scotland, moving into northwestern England. Some outbreaks of rain also across eastern areas of Scotland, but the far north and west of Scotland already getting into that clearer weather as that weather front does clear to the south and east, or move to the south and east through Thursday, pushing into Wales, bringing some more heavier rain for Wales through Thursday afternoon. As I said, many southern areas of England should stay dry through much of the day, central areas too, but there is going to be more of a breeze around tomorrow. Despite that breeze, temperatures still climbing towards the mid-20s, but a much fresher feel arriving into the northwest. Now that rain will push into the south and east through Thursday night, could linger across the far south through Friday morning, but once it clears away, a day of sunny spells and fairly light winds as well on Friday, so it will be feeling much warmer. And there's more of that to come for the weekend. Sunny skies for most of us, sunny spells at least, temperatures around the high teens and the low 20s. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on a chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's. Tonight. Violent migrant thugs attack locals, police and each other in Calais. Are these refugees welcome idiots?